Everyone, I'm with our amazing host, Mr. Chuck Canning, and Chuck is an amazing CPA, and he is very knowledgeable, and I love how he speaks and explain things. He gives so much detailed information, and I was enjoying, and I thought others can enjoy the same. So, Chuck, you were saying the banking system in the United States,
Oh
and
yeah, Rihan and I were talking about cultural differences and how it affects the business community go around the world. A lot of people, when they think cultural differences, they think of the way people live and communicate and enjoy music and art and things of that nature. But in the business world, there's also differences that sometimes can be very subtle, sometimes can be very obvious, but just the way simple transactions are enacted between companies can relate in very, very different things that make it hard for people from one country to the next to understand how to engage with other people in the international business community. And just one real simple example is I was telling Rian a moment ago that I'll expand on is the simple exchange of paying a vendor for their services. I do know many of my clients in Europe work in a system that has not used paper checks in probably 25 years or more. And in the US, writing a paper check out either by hand or using a computer printer is still probably the most common way for businesses to pay vendors. It creates a big problem when you're dealing across the continents from the US to Europe. For example, if somebody in the US is paying a European company for goods or services, if they write a check, the European company cannot cash the check. Technically they can, but if they cashed a paper check, it would take them 6 to 8 weeks to receive their funds because the banking system is just not set up to handle that efficiently because they haven't done it in decades. In the United States, on the other hand, if we reverse the transaction, a lot of businesses or individuals who are buying from businesses are not comfortable using bank transfers because they think by giving up their bank account and routing number or ABA number, they're inviting fraudulent transactions, and they don't understand how the banking system works. And they also don't understand that using bank transfers in the long run is a much simpler and more efficient way and more inexpensive way to conduct money movement. So you have, in the US, you actually have kind of a backwards culture just from that aspect compared to European, which has been much more advanced for a much longer period of time. In Europe, when businesses pay each other, it's done immediately. A wire transfer, they will put into their accounting systems or their ERP systems the list of checks that are due that day. They'll approve them, release them, tell their bank to pay the vendor, and the vendor will immediately have their funds instantaneously, and there's no holdups as far as banks holding money or things like that, which still happens in the U.S. on bank transfers. And everybody is, invoices are settled instantaneously. Mm-hmm. And again, here while we have that infrastructure here in the U.S., people are not comfortable using it. People give up their habits hard, just like there's still many people that still use their landline wired telephones. And it took a long time for the U.S. to embrace wireless technology on telephones. In part, it was cost, but in part, people didn't want to give up their old ways of doing things. So issues like that happen, and people from Europe are amazed that when they get a check from a U.S. customer and they can't process it, and they have to go back to the U.S. customer and ask for a wire transfer, and the U.S. customer is not comfortable doing that. So little simple things theoretically sometimes become an impediment for completing business transactions. I hope that makes a little bit of sense.
Oh, it makes
Yeah.
amazing sense.
And that's just one example of cultural business differences between businesses in different parts of the world. There are hurdles that they need to learn about. They need to address, and they need to come up with resolutions how to fix that problem, so that the international community can have more efficient exchanges of business transactions.
So my business is, we deal with around 200 vendors, and one of the biggest costs that you have is wire transfer.
Yep.
Every time we do a wire transfer, it's like $40 to send out money. So
Right.
and it's like sometimes it's $400 to send. Just eats away 10% margin for no reason. So,
Right.
and then when you send a check, like we pay our vendor in Pakistan
Right.
like every month over $10,000, and
Right.
then that takes like 2 months, and now they refuse to take the check. So they're saying, just give us a wire transfer, and it's so expensive.
Yeah.
And it's,
Well, and that is an issue here in the U.S. And again, Europe, in most European countries and in the EU, that is not a problem because the banks do not charge those fees. The banks in Europe understand, as does the business community that uses the system, they understand that the process of doing wire transfers is actually removing costs from the banking system. So the old way of using paper checks and manual systems to process banking transactions and clearing accounts between banks and things of that nature is being removed by the transfer process, and the banks in Europe understand that has reduced their costs, and they're passing those costs on to their customers. Here in the U.S., and it sounds like it is for you with your businesses, Rian, the banking system is looking at this as an additional service that they can add fees, even if it saves them costs. They think they can present it to their customers as a value-added product,
right.
and it really is. It should be cost savings all the way through.
Right.
So, our banking systems need to catch up with the more advanced systems elsewhere in the world.
Let's start
and
at that.
understand that to make it more efficient for both their clients and themselves, and it will actually make things move more smoothly. It will take time.
Yeah.
It will happen. But I do know, I can also say that
I want to open a bank account in Canning Bank.
I don't have a bank.
Let's open
I'm
one.
not a banker. But I can say there are, at least our U.S. system allows different forms of wire transfers or electronic fund transfers or ACH transfers. There's different
Right.
different terms for different types. And the ones that go immediately as same day, those are the ones that will have $40 fees. And sometimes there will be a $40 fee for the sender and a $25 fee for
The
the
receiver.
receiver.
Yeah, that's all out of.
It's a big problem when you're doing small transfers for $100, $200, $300 transactions, when you have a small transaction and both sides get fees of $20, $30, $40.
We need to fix this.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
For big transfers of thousands or tens of thousands of dollars, a $40 fee, a business doesn't care about that.
Right,
It's
right.
just bank fee and they write it off.
Right.
But the banks must realize that if they don't get their fee structure in line, that people are going to continue to write paper checks, and it's going to cost them more money. It costs them more money to keep that system running than it would be if they had an efficient wire transfer system that everybody used and everybody trusted. That's important too, that the clients trust the system. And the instances of fraud you'll never eliminate, but are reduced, that it's not a problem for operating within that system.
Brilliant. So everyone, this is Chuck Canning, and we're going for breakfast, and we will continue the conversation with Chuck on how to do business in the U.S. And join me live with Chuck Canning at 10 p.m. Pakistan time, and we will talk about how people in Pakistan and around the world can learn from entrepreneurs in the U.S. and do business together maybe.
Thank you, Rihan.
Thank you, Chuck.